Are you shrinking yourself to fit into your family's expectations of you? Do you have a hard time sticking up for yourself? Does your family not respect your dreams, ambitions, or goals? Does your family always push boundaries that you tried to set? Do they ask inappropriate or uncomfortable questions? Have you tried to set boundaries in the past only to let them fail? If you answered yes to any of those questions, this episode's for you. Welcome to A Year Without Fear, the podcast where we stop letting fear make our decisions and start building the creative lives we actually want. I'm your host, Bethany Morris, and over the next year, I'm going to take you along with me as I write a novel, attempt to turn content creation into my full-time career, and confront my deepest, darkest fears. Welcome back to another episode of A Year Without Fear. I'm your host, Bethany Morris, and I'm a certified somatic and trauma-informed coach who believes that the greatest version of yourself lies on the other side of facing your fears. And today we are going to talk about something that gets harder during the holiday season, establishing boundaries with the people who raised you. So what we're going to cover today is number one, why the holidays test our boundaries more than any other time, the specific reasons you struggle to set boundaries and why it's not your fault, 5 practical ways to establish and maintain boundaries this holiday season, what to do when people won't respect your boundaries, and finally, homework to prepare you for the holidays. But before we dive in, I wanted to give a quick novel update. So I don't remember if I mentioned this before, but I am writing a murder mystery. I'm about 8,000 words into the novel as of today, which is November 20th, and I am officially past the inciting incident. Still finding it pretty easy to write, although this week I've been really tired, but I have been trying to give myself grace as we talked about last episode. I also wanted to shout out a YouTuber in the writing space. Her name is Ellen Brock, and she has a series called The 4 Types of Novel Writers. And there she goes into depth into 4 different writer archetypes. And this has helped me immensely with the first draft of my novel because it gave me permission to outline and then write and then outline and then write, etc. And for the record, if you're curious, I am a methodological pantser. I will link that series above and in the description. Okay, let's get into the episode. So, first, I want to tell you a story that will help you understand why setting boundaries are so important during the holiday season and also why they're so hard. So, my family, I feel like during every single gathering has a story that they talk about that has to do with me. And my grandparents and I apparently went to this very special and fancy restaurant when I was a child. And they and the waiters and everyone were apparently so impressed with how um, polite I was being. So yeah, my family tells this story every time we get together, every time I come over to the house. And I feel like it makes me feel small and like I am in arrested developments in their minds. And I think the major conflict is wanting to be seen as how I am now versus how they remember me to be. And this wasn't a one time thing. This is how my family sees me. And for years, I have shrunk myself. I had made myself smaller to fit into their idea of me. I performed as the version of Bethany that they expected, the quieter, smaller, less ambitious, less complicated woman. But I have decided to stop doing that. And that doesn't mean that it's not hard. It doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt. But at the end of the day, you have to protect number one. And for me, that meant doing something pretty radical. You know, I haven't seen my family in about 2 years and they live an hour and a half away from me. And to be honest, I have so much more peace in my life because I'm not performing anymore. I'm not making myself smaller. I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not during the holidays. So when I talk about boundaries today, I'm not speaking theoretically. I'm speaking from the hardest boundary that I've ever had to set to this day and also to maintain. So, what exactly are boundaries? According to Nedra Glover Tawwab, excuse me if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, definition in her book, Set Boundaries, Find Peace, she defines that boundaries are expectations and needs that help you feel safe and comfortable in your relationships. She goes on to say, expectations in relationships help you stay mentally and emotionally well. Learning when to say no, when to say yes is also an important part of feeling comfortable when interacting with others. Some examples of boundaries are physical boundaries, and that can be personal touch, space, and privacy. Emotional boundaries, which is what you share, time boundaries, how you spend your time and saying no, mental boundaries, which are your thoughts, beliefs, and values being respected, and finally material boundaries, which is your money, possession, and resources. And this matters because boundaries aren't about controlling other people. They're about honoring yourself, and they're about creating relationships where you don't have to shrink yourself in order to belong. So, if boundaries are so important, why do we struggle to set them, especially with family? I'm going to break it down into four main reasons, and I want to see which one resonates with you guys the most. So, number one is you weren't taught boundaries as a child. So if your parents didn't model boundaries, you didn't learn that you're allowed to have them. You may have learned that your needs don't matter. You may have learned that love is conditional upon compliance. You may have learned that saying no leads to rejection or abandonment. For me personally, I have a fear of abandonment, and I think that has a lot to do with me being adopted. I have felt for the most part in my life that I had to prove my worth in order to be loved. So setting boundaries to me felt like risking the love that I had worked so hard to earn. And if I said no, if I set a limit, I think my subconscious thought is, would they still want me? So reason number two is learned behavior. So you could have watched a caretaker never set boundaries. They were always available, always accommodating, always sacrificing. And you internalize this. This is what love looks like. This is what being good looks like. So now when you try to set a boundary, it feels selfish or wrong because you are doing something that you never saw modeled. And reason number three is the fear of conflict. If conflict in your household wasn't modeled properly, if disagreements led to screaming, the silent treatment, or just emotional volatility in general, you learn that conflict is dangerous. So boundaries kind of feel like lighting a match during near gasoline. You'd rather shrink yourself than risk the explosion. You would rather live in discomfort than causing a scene. And finally, reason number four is the need to people please. So, people pleasing and boundaries are opposites of each other. People pleasing says, I'm going to manage everyone's emotions around me so that they like me. And boundaries say, I am responsible for my emotions and you are responsible for yours. And holidays are people pleasing events turned up to the nth degree. The pressure to make everyone happy, to keep the peace, to be grateful, to perform joy. It makes setting boundaries feel impossible, but it is not impossible. So the next section is how to establish boundaries in 5 practical steps. So, step number one is to evaluate your wants, your needs, and your values. Before you can set a boundary, you need to ask yourself, what do I need? And some questions you can ask are, what do I want from this holiday season? What do I need in order to feel safe and respected? What are my core values and where are they being violated? And then examples of specific boundaries are, I need my career choices respected, not questioned. I need to leave gatherings when I am overwhelmed and not be guilted into staying. I need my body and health choices to be off limits for commentary. And this matters because you can't defend a boundary that you haven't clearly defined for yourself first. So, step two is to work on embodying your self worth. So, boundaries only hold firm when you believe that you are worth protecting. And if you believe that you don't deserve respect, you will abandon your boundaries the moment that they're challenged. This isn't a one time thing, it is daily work. Affirmations, therapy, somatic practices, surrounding yourself with people who see your worth, whatever helps you internalize that you are worthy of respect, even from people who knew you when you were young and powerless, is the direction that you want to go in. Step three is to start small. So you don't want to start with the hardest boundary. You want to practice lower stakes first. So some examples of starting small are, actually, I would prefer tea instead of coffee. I am going to step aside for a few minutes. I'd rather not talk about that right now. Step 4 is to be consistent. If you set a boundary once but don't maintain it, people are going to learn that they can eventually wear you down over time. So let's say your boundary is, I'm not discussing my relationship status at Thanksgiving. The first time someone asks about your relationship status, you can say, I'm actually keeping that private right now. And if they push and say, come on, just tell us, you can repeat calmly, I'm keeping that private. How about we talk about XYZ? And if they push again, you stay firm. You say, I've said I'm not discussing it, and I'm going to step away if this continues. And then the important part is that you follow through. Consistency teaches people that you mean it, that you are setting firm boundaries and that you're going to stick to it. And inconsistency tells them that you are going to cave upon pressure. And then step 5 is to communicate and follow through with consequences. So when boundaries are crossed, there have to be consequences, not as punishment, but as protection for yourself. So let's say your boundary is, please don't make comments on my body or my eating habits. At dinner, someone says, are you really going to eat that much? You can say, I've asked you not to comment on my eating. And if you continue to do that, I'm going to leave the table. And if they do it again, you are going to leave the table calmly without drama, and you're going to follow through. But the truth is, and I know this, that some people are not willing to change or accept responsibility for the behavior. And at that point, you kind of have to ask yourself, how do I want to be treated at this point in time in my life? And this goes back to your wants and needs. How do you want people to treat you? What do you need from them in order to show up as the fully embodied version of yourself? For me, the answer was that I need to take a step back from seeing my family. And to be honest, I have so much more peace because I feel like I'm not performing anymore. I feel like I'm not making myself smaller. Obviously, that is a more extreme boundary, but personally, it was the right one for me. And only you know what the right boundary for you is. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how to talk about your boundaries. So you want to be firm, you want to be level headed, and you want to be neutral. Remember that you're not trying to win an argument or punish anyone. You're just simply stating a fact. So, what not to do is use therapy speak, because I tend to find that it puts people on guard. So, examples of what not to say are, you are violating my boundaries. I am practicing self care by not engaging with your toxicity. That's triggering for me. Instead, you can say, if they ask about your career or life choices, actually, I'm happy with my life choices, and I'd appreciate it if we didn't revisit this conversation. If they push for more time or attendance at events, you can say, I've already committed to what works for me, and I'm not personally able to do more than that. And then finally, if your Aunt Judy is asking you a whole bunch of inappropriate questions, you can say, Aunt Judy, that is personal, and I'm not going to discuss it. The key, again, is to be direct, to be clear, to be calm, to not over explain or justify yourself. Simply state your boundary and stop talking. Okay, moving on to the homework section. Assignment number 1 is going to be to clarify your boundaries. So this week, I want you to write down your wants, needs, and values. And then based on those answers, I want you to determine what boundaries you want to set during the holidays. So you can use these prompts. What do I need? Do I need to feel safe with my family? What topics are off limits? What behaviors will I not tolerate? How much time and energy am I willing to give? What will I do if my boundaries are crossed? And then assignment number 2 will be to practice your phrases. So write down 3 to 5 phrases you can use when your boundaries are crossed, and practice saying them out loud, in a mirror, to a friend, to a partner, until they feel natural. So some examples are, I am not discussing that. That doesn't work for me. I need to step away for a little bit. I've already answered that. I'm going to leave if this continues, Aunt Judy. So why this matters is that when you're in the moment and somebody is going to push your boundary, your body is going to react in that flight or fight response, and your nervous system is going to activate, and you may feel tense, you may feel anxious, you may have your thoughts slow and not know what to say. So, having these phrases ready means that you don't have to think about it. You can just simply respond. Okay, so today we talked about the fear of establishing boundaries during the holiday season. We explored why holidays make boundaries harder with the pressure to perform, to please, and to shrink. We covered 4 reasons you struggle with boundaries. Either you weren't taught them, you learn boundaryless behavior, you feel fear conflict, or you're stuck in people pleasing mode. And then we went through 5 practical steps to establish your boundaries, which were to evaluate your needs, embody your self worth, start small, be consistent, and communicate with consequences. Setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish, it makes you honest. And the people who love you and respect you will respect your boundaries. And the people that don't, well, that tells you a lot about the type of person that they are. I know that this is hard, especially with family, but you deserve to be seen for who you are now, not who you were as a child. You deserve to take up space and you deserve to protect your peace. So, once again, thank you for being here, for doing the hard work of figuring out how to show up for yourself, even when it costs you something. So, tell me in the comments, what's one boundary you're going to set during this holiday season? Let's support each other, drop your boundary below, and let's normalize protecting our peace. I'm Bethany Morris, and this has been another episode of A Year Without Fear. Remember, you don't owe anyone access to you at the cost of yourself. I'll see you next week.